We'll never be moved from here. Our lives can live in the seeds we've sown.
Welcome to The Art of Relating, a space where relationship, intimacy, and sacred sexuality become pathways to liberation. Here, every rupture is a teacher, every desire is an opening, and every difference is an opportunity to deeper intimacy. Whether we are unraveling attachment wounds, leaning into conflict with presence, or returning to love as a living practice, this is where we explore what becomes possible in relationship when we choose to stay. I'm your host, Tammy Chow from Somatic Spirit.
There was a woman there whose child was in Gaza fighting as a soldier because all kids have to fight. And I remember one of the men from the West Bank saying, I can understand why you're proud of your son for defending your country. That's a big stretch. That's a big stretch.
Today, I have the privilege of sitting down with my teacher, Ann Bradney, and we sit down to talk about her body of work called Radical Aliveness, which has been one of the most profoundly impactful modalities that I've experienced. And over the past year, I've had the privilege to train with Ann in Montreal with about 35 other leaders in this modality that centers on principles that allow for us to be with mess, conflict, and complexity in one room to help us meet in our differences rather than stay stuck in the polarization of separation. And the principles that Radical Aliveness are built on are knowing I don't know, being willing to be changed, honoring multiple perspectives, welcoming everything, cultivating a non-shaming heart and attitude, and do no harm, do your part. These are the fundamental principles that hold the container of Radical Aliveness work. Then within that, it allows room for the rage, the grief, and messiness that exists within our humanity and helps us learn how to meet in our differences as a way forward. So in this episode, Ann talks about how she has taken this work to start a program in Israel, training Israeli Jews and Palestinian leaders to hold this work together and meet in their complex differences. The program began before October 7th, and when October 7th happened, in the third module of this program, everyone in this program committed to finishing this out together despite the tragedy and the war and everything that was happening. And so you'll hear just profoundly beautiful stories of the ways that these leaders have risked their lives and crossed checkpoints in order to continue meeting together, even throughout the conflict. This work has deeply touched my heart, and I truly feel like this is some of the most important work that we can be doing in the world right now, because on the surface, in social media and the news, a lot of us are mostly seeing separation and rage and grief and pain and tragedy. But I also care about revealing work that's being done from the ground up and showing this peace work that's been happening behind the scenes through October 7th and revealing the hope that is still here for humanity by choosing to be in the pain together. And I really wanted to help spread awareness for this work that's happening, that does need funding to continue to create change and hope for the future. So if you feel touched by the stories that you're going to hear in this episode and what this work is creating, and you feel called to support the Israel and Palestine Peace Leadership Program, I have a link under the show notes if you want to contribute directly to help Ann and Radical Aliveness create a nonprofit in Israel to continue this peace work. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Tammy.
I am so excited to have you on the podcast today, and it feels a little bit surreal just because 4 years ago I ended up in your Radical Aliveness retreat at Esalen that at the time I didn't even have like a voice to speak. I
I
was like a
remember that.
quiet little perfect good girl Asian mouse that
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
have
And I kind of
preferences or
remember you
needs.
screaming a lot in that.
Totally. Yes. So, a little bit of background of how I met Anne. First of all, Anne is the founder of Radical Aliveness, which is a relational, somatic, beautiful, cathartic group modality that I was introduced to weirdly first by my Vedic astrologer who read my chart and was like, yeah, you need to go to therapy.
Oh.
and and then he sent me to some radical aliveness practitioners where I started working with Madison Neese. And so we did a
Oh.
lot of one-on-one work together. And then I watched the docu-series, the group docu-series. And then I saw that you were doing the retreat at Esalen. And so I was like, I have to go. And I felt ready by that time. And yeah, I've had James and Brittany on this podcast too, and I've talked about their process during that retreat. And I actually haven't talked much about mine, but I believe that mine was triggered by sexual trauma, that a lot of sexual trauma that I've experienced that I had really not unpacked or really ever talked about. It was just something that like happened to me
Mhm.
that I didn't really think affected me that much. Like it was like, oh, that's just part of my past. But you know, in the way that radical aliveness does, it started with the trigger, and then you kind of led me really deep into being allowed to like process and emote with that trigger. And I remember being in the middle of the room and stomping my feet against a cube and screaming and crying and really being witnessed.
Mhm.
And like in an incredible Hulk fashion, like screaming and beating the shit out of a block and saying crazy things like, I'm gonna tie your head. I'm gonna tie your head up to a truck and drag you for miles. Like just shit that like is so buried deep in me that I would have never expressed. And a really profound moment was when you had me look into the eyes of every man in the group after I had come to and like really landed in my body. And to be in that moment of like sheer power and like sheer ferocity
Oh.
that I was so afraid of,
Oh.
and to
Oh.
see men looking at me with tears in their eyes and like respect and
Hmm.
just like that was so profound, and
Wow.
yeah, and to have, I feel like on day 3 we were all, in the hot springs at Esalen nude together,
Mhm.
which, and just like saying I love you like so genuinely to each other. And I think that I can say that that's the first time that I tasted like the purity of love that I've always been searching for.
Wow, Tammy, what a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it with me.
Yeah, and thank you for everything.
Mm.
And yeah, the ways that has rippled out is insane. Like I can't believe I'm on a podcast right now and I can speak clearly. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Even during the retreat, we had this breath work session and you had your hand on me and you were like, breathe, fierce one. And it was like 45 minutes of intense breath work. And at the end, I had this vision of me, like as if I was looking at social media and I saw my face teaching or speaking. And at that moment, I was like, fuck no, God, there's no way I am getting on social media. Like, all my stories of body dysmorphia, being afraid of seeing myself on camera, like, all of the stories were there. And I was like, I am never doing that. And then in the next year, I got on social media and then like grew a following and and pretty much built my practice that way.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been a ride since then. and to like bring it back so that people get an understanding. What is radical aliveness to you?
I would say it's a philosophy, and it encompasses a lot of techniques and skills, but mostly it's a philosophy based on principles. And I can say that I, like most everyone trained in the United States or in the West, was trained as an expert. And what that meant was that I learned a modality, let's say, and I learned what you were supposed to do with that modality. And I learned the techniques, and I learned that you just go and you apply those techniques the same to everyone all over the world. And on my journey of really wanting to invite the world in, to invite in world and social issues, to invite in different perspectives, different cultures, I learned that an expert model has some wonderful information to offer, but it cannot hold the complexity of the world. So radical aliveness has been my attempt to create a philosophy that allows people to deeply use all the things that they are expert in, but with an awareness of the differences that are walking into their room, with awareness of complexity, with an awareness of how they have been socialized and see the world. So I kind of moved from this expert model to something I call the self as instrument, where the work is really asking people to deeply know themselves, to deeply understand how they've been influenced to see, feel, and make meaning of the world, to understand that everybody else has also been socialized and sees and feels and makes meaning of the world in different ways. And based on the principles, which there are, I can name them for you, but based on the principles, to show up to meeting with people in a deep space of not knowing, in a deep space of letting yourself meet someone else in a way that they will guide the process where it needs to go, and that you show up with everything you know in service of the person across from you, not in service to a technique or a modality. So I don't know if that is a clear way of saying it. It's hard to get it into words, but it's got a lot to do with my understanding of the world is so complex, and I'm never going to know everything. But how am I helping people to know themselves, to become who they are, without overlaying my perspective or my view on them and forcing them to conform to my expertise rather than having my expertise conform to them?
Yeah, beautiful. And would you be willing to go into each of the
Principles?
Yes, the principles.
Yeah. So over the years, I learned that I needed a foundational set of principles to work from. And when I sat down with a colleague and really was in a deep conversation about how I do what I do, what came through was, I know I don't know. And for me, that means I know a lot. I know a tremendous amount, but I know that I don't know you in ways that you know yourself, and I never can. And so I'm showing up full of not knowing and being open to the mystery of what wants to emerge, both in groups and individually. I honor multiple perspectives. That also comes from an awareness that we've all been socialized and that we see the world in different ways. So without being able to honor multiple perspectives, we can't possibly move forward in the conflicts that we're in. We have to know that we see things differently and to learn how to be with that and to use those differences to find out more about ourselves and others. I'm willing to be changed. And what that means is I'm coming in with my very narrow perspective, but I meet you. And when I meet you, and maybe some of the things I learned, I find out, wow, that wasn't a complete story, or that wasn't the full truth, or there's more to know here. I'm willing to change my mind. And this has a lot to do with what I'm doing in Israel and Palestine, because if you're meeting with people that you consider your enemies, you have to be willing to change your mind when you see their humanity. I cultivate a non-shaming heart and attitude. And for me, that means, how do I honor and have mercy for my humanity? And when I can have mercy for my own humanity, it becomes really possible for me to have mercy for you. So I'm cultivating a non-shaming heart, and also that requires feeling everything like you felt, wanting to smash somebody's head and drag them through the streets. That was inside of you. And if there wasn't a welcoming of that, you would never get to what's on the other side, which was the pain, which was the power, which was the ability to stand tall. You needed to pass through that to get someplace else. And I think many people are afraid of those places. So that's also something in Radical Aliveness, that we welcome that powerful energy in groups and individually that is often very scary for people. What else?
I think do no harm, do your part is a newer one. I think before you had say yes to everything, and I'm curious about the change.
Welcoming everything is what I was just talking about. So that's still there. Welcoming everything means that there is nothing that can come out of me or
I'm just
somebody.
Gonna get it. It's right here.
Okay.
Oh yes, welcoming everything
is there's nothing that can come out of you or in a group or of another person that's not part of being human. And if I'm not afraid of that in myself or in others, within the parameters of the kind of container I'm holding, because in the container I'm holding, we are saying do no harm, right? And what's the other one? You have
do your part.
There. And do your part. So do no harm allows us to welcome everything.
Right.
Right? Because if I say, in this room, there are certain guidelines we follow. You don't hurt yourself. You don't hurt another person physically. And you don't hurt the room. Then there's nothing that can't come out that's not okay. And when we welcome everything, we will always pass through to someplace beyond what we've been afraid of knowing or feeling or bringing out in the open. Right. So do no harm is the guidelines that we use to make that space possible. And do your part is everything that we're doing in this work, it goes back out into the world. If it doesn't go back out into the world, there is no point to it.
Right. Beautiful. Wow. Yeah, I kind of understood welcoming everything differently, literally yesterday. And hold on, let me slow down. Yeah, when you're speaking to welcoming everything, I found Radical Aliveness, what I love about it, and most of the modalities that I really am drawn to, is the mess. that sometimes I feel has gotten left out of the traditional, when you say expert model, like therapy models, or like, how can I do it so perfectly? Not to say, like, nonviolent communication has been a huge part of my path, but there's ways that, everybody who starts nonviolent communication, I feel like goes through this phase of being a little bit of an asshole where you're like starting to police people, like, actually, was that an interpretation right there? you
Yeah.
know and it's sometimes this like kind of colonized way of then asserting politeness. And I love when we're in the training in Montreal, when you say, like, there are so many models out there, um, that like want to get us to peace or understanding, and they haven't worked yet. And that, like, in radical aliveness, it allows space for us to stumble and to be messy and to fuck up and not do it so right or so perfect. And like, all of this spiritual and healing jargon out there of like learning how to be yourself more, I've learned the most is like just having a space where I could be a mess, where I could like be held, like where I could be less than extraordinary and be celebrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is even like, this summer I've been in, Montreal with you, and then I was in Seattle with you, and like I've just landed back in Santa Fe. And I feel like I'm a different version of myself than when I left. I'm like, whoa, I feel more like myself. Like, I'm less like appeasing. I'm not less polite. I'm just more myself. And
I'm so curious about what you feel allowed you to do that, like to feel like you were more yourself.
well, I think probably very specifically in Seattle, we had an exercise where you had us go out and look in nature and find an object for what describes our medicine. And my mind went first to, I'm going to find a rose or a flower because we cut down flowers and they still grow back. And that's the love of the mother. It's like my mind already made up this whole story of what
Right.
I should be or what my medicine should be, this like
Right.
Instagram idealized version. And then as I was seeking, my body found a dandelion weed. And it was this beautiful metaphor, of how weeds are so misunderstood and they're hacked out of the ecosystem of a garden because it doesn't look pretty. But in reality, it's a deeply medicinal herb. And like so much of my wisdom and so much of the reparative healing that has come from learning from you, and also just like I've been educated to think that all of my wisdom comes from my accolades and how good of a student I can be and how expert I can be at the things I do. But actually, it's the dirty, shameful things like having experienced rape, or having, grown up with like an alcoholic father, or, being in debt. Like all of those things that are so shameful, that are where I find my deepest power and medicine and
Yeah.
contribution to the world.
Yeah.
And it's
Inside out rather than outside in. And I think that's been the journey of radical aliveness from the expert, which is memorizing something on the outside and knowing where you're going and having an agenda. So when people show up in your room, you actually know where they're going to end up. I
right.
don't want to know. How can I possibly know? I want a huge space where I don't know where we're going. And from the inside out, I'm meeting you with all of my power and all of my gifts as a human being, and navigating our relationship through what you're bringing to me, what you have to teach me, what I might not be knowing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to learn from you where we're going. And
Yeah,
maybe we both have to be open to the bigger mystery of the universe leading us somewhere
totally.
also.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing that I admire. One of the things I admire most about you, I've heard you talk about in your podcast when somebody asks you, like, what are you most proud about? And you'll say, my courage, because I've always been afraid. Because like now you're literally facilitating this between Palestinians and Israeli
Israeli
Jews.
Jews, because there's also a lot of Israeli Palestinians.
Yeah. I mean, the many things that I can be afraid of in my life day to day. Can you just speak a little to fear and courage and how you continue to do this work and what drives you?
You know, I have a lot less fear now than I ever did. But I had a lot of fear my entire adult life because the journey I was on was so uncharted. It wasn't guided. A lot of things came to support me. People supported me. I mean, I feel very, very blessed by the support I've received over the years. But the journey I was on was one that was really coming from the inside out. And there was nobody to tell me what to do or where I was going. So much of the time that I was doing this work and developing it, I was stepping into retreats or stepping into groups not knowing, because I was developing this work and I really didn't know where it was going. I didn't know what I was doing in a lot of ways, but I had such a strong sense of there's something that is coming through that I need to really honor. So I sometimes would feel when I would go into a retreat, let's say at SLM way back in the early days, that I was on a tightrope with no wire because I really didn't know. I wasn't following something that said, here's what you do and here's how to make it successful and here's how to lead everyone. I was really saying life, energy, the world, this group, I want to surrender to you and I want to be in service of all the bigger information and energy that wants to take us where we want to go. So I was out of control a lot. And for me, I think probably for most of us, that's scary. I would many times in the middle of a retreat when things were really wild and all sorts of things were happening, I would feel terrified. And I would think, I have no idea what's happening, but I have to trust. And then something amazing would happen. And I think in that place where I was so scared and I didn't know what I was doing, it's also a place where I'm saying to the groups and the people I work with, I trust you. So it's not me that's doing this. We're in it together. And I'm trusting you to also show up and bring your wisdom and what's needed. And I think that you never know what's going to happen. So I think that's a very, I don't know what the right word is. Is it unstable? It's something that was scary. It was very scary. And at the same time, it was such a clear path. And I kept learning every time I did anything. So Radical Aliveness just kept developing and developing. And I would say yes to everything that seemed to help me bring it more into life. I feel like I gave birth over about 18 years, you know?
Yeah.
It's really literally like that. I gave birth to this way of working and being in the world, and now it's out there. And now I feel it's in a lot of hands and people are developing it through their own vision. But I think it's the not knowing. It's the working in a way where you're really showing up and saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm bringing all my gifts, I'm bringing some ideas, I'm bringing my skills, and I'm still honoring the mystery that wants to be honored here, that wants to be held here.
Totally. Gosh. And like sometimes I wish I never met you because now I'm on this like threshold where I'm coming away from the expert models and I could see myself releasing control, and it's happening inside of me, and my containers are becoming more explosive, more conflict, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But actually it resolves the more I'm like, okay, I trust you. I trust you. And it's just crazy the shift when I show up in not knowing how empowering it is for the people that I'm leading because I'm not holding their hand.
And yeah, isn't that amazing, that shift of I don't know what I'm doing, or I know my own little part here, but you all have a part also. And it's a way of meeting human beings on a very, like Martin Buber, I and thou. We're really meeting on a level that says, I don't know how to say it because I don't want it to sound too simplistic, but I know that every person I meet has all the power I have. I'm not above them. I'm not beneath them. We're meeting human to human, and we're going somewhere together. And I know that I'm going to learn things from them, and they're going to learn things from me. But I think that place of not knowing is a place of profound empowerment, because the moment we know, we're basically saying to somebody else, I have the blueprint for your healing. And as far as I'm concerned, that can't be true. It can't be true that I know what you need for healing. I don't.
Right.
Your journey is your journey, and I need to really be with you and find the way to empower you there.
Yeah. And in a macro level, I feel like it's kind of your vision for a way forward of like, we keep trying to create political systems or ideologies to be like, this is the way we're going to survive and thrive. And you're kind of saying we all need to be in our differences. And when we meet in that way, de-armored, like in a place of like just humility. And that takes a lot of work somatically, in my experience, of finding safety in my own self to be not guarded and not defensive and not, from that place of I know because I want control.
Yeah.
But when I've shown up that way, we get to places of resolution that I could have never dreamed up in my own mind or learned from some school or, system.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you do show up guarded, let's say, because that's also welcome, that in the container, there's a willingness to always turn back and look at what's happening in you. So if you are guarded, welcome, because maybe that guardedness has some wisdom and information that we need in order to move forward. So I think just the idea that everybody can show up exactly as they are if they are making the agreement to come back and look within.
Right. Kind of like, it's like I have the space to charge at somebody that I'm triggered by because we have these agreements. And then, you lead me back to what are your values here? What is that like healthy aggression actually telling you about yourself that you know and that you care about, and those are true for me and the person that I'm charging at. They have their own values, and suddenly there's more rather than less.
I love that, the way you're describing it, because it really is, how are we using everything to find out more about ourselves and more about the other, right?
Yeah.
So once you turn in and you say, oh, this charging at somebody means this to me and it comes from here, and you communicate that to the person and they tell you what's happening for them, a lot more information has come into the room. And I think that's what I love about this work, is that it's not just interpersonal, it's also systemic, so that we're really bringing in all sorts of information, the ways we've been socialized, what our values are, what we learned, how we learn to express ourselves, what things mean to us, our assumptions. There's so much information that once it starts coming into the room, helps us to see each other in this very detailed way, as opposed to a simplistic, cartoonish, black and white way based on our assumptions or based on the media or based on what we've been taught.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, Tammy, I think this is an important thing, that it really takes skills to learn how to navigate all that energy. And part of the process of radical aliveness is that there's so many opportunities in a group where if someone gets triggered, it will take you back to your deepest wound. And I think being able to face and feel these really powerful and deep feelings allows us to be so much less afraid in the here and now when feelings arise. It's like, oh, there's that feeling. I can be with that.
Yeah. I'd love to one last story based on that is the person I charged at is one of my closest friends in the module now. And
is that true?
Yeah. We hang out all the time, and we would love to probably one day facilitate together. And for us and the relationships I have, I almost feel like I need to be able to have that charging or that meeting head to head and conflict. And I need to know that that's a value of the people who are in my closest circle, that we can go there and we're willing to move through it. And the place that we sink is the deepest intimacy, that I've always longed for. Because then I know it feels safe that we can even go there and there's love after. And on that note, I would love to, you mentioned, so just to speak about Israel and Palestine, I know that you said that it started before October 7th. Could you tell us about the program and when it started and the mission?
Yeah, so many, many years ago, I think maybe in 2006, I met someone at Esalen who was working with Jews and Palestinians, and maybe it was 2005. And I had already been putting out to the world, I had already been at Esalen working, that I wanted to do work with the world. I just was really interested in not just personal process, but how to bring very powerful, energetic work to the world and social issues. And so I met this woman, and she was working with Jews and Palestinians, and the head of Esalen suggested to her that she ask me to come back next year, I think which 2006, and work with a group of Jews and Palestinians that came to Esalen. So that was my first time. Talk about terror. I remember feeling so afraid, having no idea what I was doing. But by the time I got there to their group, they had worked with a bunch of other leaders who had been, I think, polite or put them in their, gave them little exercises, really held them in a certain way. And all I remember is that when I went into that room, that first of all, I couldn't tell the difference. So I had to make them stand like they were shocked, because I said, can all the Palestinians go to one side and all the Jews to the other? Because I can't tell the difference between you. Which I can now, but it's hilarious. They were so shocked. So they all stood separately. And I said, I really have no idea what I'm doing. I told them, I don't know. I've never lived war. I've never been in a dangerous place. I haven't been bombed. I haven't known people who were killed. I haven't had that life at all. But what I can tell you is that I know what it's like to be terrified, because I do, and that I'm not afraid of your fear, and I'm not afraid of any of your feelings. And I don't know what happened, but it was one of those moments where maybe the energy had just been dying to move and they just blew up. So it was walk into the room, explosion. And from there, it was just easy. It was like, okay, now we're in it. And they loved me. So I kept working with this, not the same group, but many of them, on and off, and with new people, sometimes going to Israel, sometimes doing it at Esalen, once at Omega in New York. And then around 2015, I had started working with Nikki Angel, doing some work in Nairobi, and really, really developing Radical Aliveness more, and seeing how much my assumptions and the way I saw the world were flavoring the work, and how much I needed to learn. So I went to Nairobi from kind of 2015 to probably 2019, something like that. It might have been longer, and did a lot of work with some groups from all over the world. I mean, there were people from Canada, the United States, Vietnam, Korea, Kenya, Nigeria. I mean, it was like a very, very mixed group. And I stopped working in Israel because I said, suddenly I thought, I don't know enough. I feel like I'm bringing my perspective and overlaying it. I got very humble, because suddenly I felt like the way I was working was not informed enough. And so during this period of being in Nairobi, I learned so much and developed Radical Aliveness with so much more cultural awareness, so much more sensitivity to differences, so much more informed. And the woman who I had worked with in Israel called me in maybe 2020 or 21 something, and said, you have to come back. You have to come back. And I felt ready. So she and another woman gathered together a group of people. I think in 2022, I did a big workshop in Israel and people loved it. And then in 2023, we started a program where they had gathered all the people together. And the intention of the program was to work with Jews and Palestinians using Radical Aliveness as the philosophy to help us learn about each other and work with the conflict. We met in January, we met in May, and then in October, I went over to do the third module, and October 7th happened. I mean, I was there. I was actually in Egypt October 6th, and then October 7th, Sylvia, who's my Palestinian partner, and I came back. And then I just went around the country. We didn't have a module, obviously, and I went around the country and just worked with people. I think they set up a whole bunch of different workshops for me to be with people, and I did that. And then the woman that we had been doing it with, the Jewish woman, dropped out, the leader. And so Sylvia and I said, okay, she dropped out to do something different. It was a little difficult for us, but we used it as this opportunity to say to the group, how committed are you? Here's what we're saying you have to be willing to do. Can you make this commitment for the rest of the time? If you don't want to do it, this was right after October 7th. You don't want to do it. You don't want to show up. You don't want to be with each other. Drop out now, because we're going to be together and we're going to continue. Don't ask me how we're going to do it, because we had no money. We had nothing. But everybody said yes. They all said yes.
Yeah.
So we met in January separately because we couldn't bring them together. And then we met in May for the first time all together. So October 2023 was when October 7th happened. By May of that year, the war in Gaza was going on. And so for me, the thing that is so meaningful is that everybody stayed. We have 2 more modules, and then we're going to graduate people.
Right.
And it's been profound, just profound.
I remember you telling me a story about needing to find permits and organize where you were going to meet after October 7th and what that process was like.
Yeah, so before October 7th, we would go back and forth between the West Bank and a place called Neotz Madar in the south, which was a kibbutz, beautiful. And we would just go back and forth. It was easy to get permits for people from the West Bank to come. And it was easy for Israeli Jews to go into the West Bank. So we would just go back and forth. Once October 7th happened, you couldn't get permits for Palestinians to come into Israel. Still can't. Still cannot. The Jewish people were really afraid to go to the West Bank. And the place we stayed in the West Bank said, we can't have people speaking Hebrew here. We can't. It's like everything was so touchy. So right in May, so first in January, we met separately. And then in May, we had the Jewish people staying at a hotel in Jerusalem. We had the Palestinians staying at a hotel in the West Bank. We found a meeting room in the West Bank where people could bus in and be there for the day and then bus back out. People were terrified, but we did it. And so that was what we did then. And then after that, we found a place at the Dead Sea. I think we had one more module that we had to do separate because we didn't have enough money to meet together. And it cost a lot to meet in that way. And then we found this place at the Dead Sea. So now we're meeting at the Dead Sea and everybody can come there.
What was that first meeting like to be back together after October 7th? Like, do you have any stories of processes that happened in the group?
Yeah. It's so vivid in my mind.
Yeah, I bet.
It's such a vivid memory. I remember, talk about feeling afraid. I was afraid.
To say the least, I bet.
Thinking, oh my God, I'm going to hold this. I'm going to hold this. Oh my God. Yeah. So I sent them all this material ahead of time for them to read. I reminded them everything we had learned. I reminded them about the principles. I reminded them everything. Like, here's everything we've learned. When we came in the first day, we made an altar and people brought different things. I remember there was an American dollar on the altar, and there were bullets on the altar. I can't remember all the things, but just seeing that altar, and if I had the dollar and the bullets really stick with me, you know?
Yeah.
And I made them, I think that first day, they all wanted to kill me. I made them read slowly through all our skills. Because I was thinking they have to remember what we're doing because this is going to be intense. Once I let go of that, it was a huge explosion. And we had 2 new people in the group because one of our Palestinian women had moved away from the West Bank and another woman had left. So we brought 2 new women in who were witnessing this explosion and were in total shock. And people were saying all sorts of things, and so much truth came out, so much information that they had been afraid to bring before. As much as they had brought a lot of information, this was more. And people were saying really hard things, maybe things other people didn't want to hear. And I remember people being shocked and people yelling at each other, and we kind of just let it move. And at the end, I remember 2 of these, this was the first process. I remember 2 of these new women said, "What is going on here? Will people even come back?" And we were like, "Oh, yeah, people will be back. We'll be back tomorrow." And I remember one of the women saying, "I've never witnessed anything this intense that didn't just destroy."
Yeah.
And she said, "This is amazing that all of this can come out and we can come back together." So they came back the next day. And I mean, we had a lot of different experiences that week. And stories that come out, because when you have that much conflict, it can start one place, but just like you experienced, Tammy, it goes someplace deeper. So it might start with rage at someone and lead to a story about what somebody witnessed as a child from a soldier in the West Bank who was humiliating his uncle, or someone talking about being bombed in Israel, in the South, or losing friends on a bus because of a suicide bomber. So, you know, once these stories start to come and people bring them forth, something so beautiful happens because we all get very touched. It stops being a fight about who's right and who's wrong, and it turns into the story of humanity. I mean, there was a woman there whose child was in Gaza fighting as a soldier because, right, all kids have to fight. And I remember one of the men from the West Bank saying, "I can understand why you're proud of your son for defending your country." And that's a big stretch. That's a big stretch.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of fear. And at some point, somebody said, I think one of the men from the West Bank said, "Listen, you're also afraid, but let me tell you what's going to happen. If anybody comes and finds us here, you're going to be taken to safety, and we're going to be taken into interrogation. If neighbors come and say, what are Israeli Jews doing here? We know all our neighbors, and we'll protect you. And then one of the Jewish men in our group said, and if Israeli soldiers come here, I will protect you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that brings tears to my eyes. Just, it's like, when you talk about these stories and what happens inside the containers is really like being changed, like when you tell that story, there's something that drops in me that's like, I can't possibly see you or this other person as a monster anymore.
Right, you cannot. And the thing about this program that I will say is I can do a weekend workshop and people will have a profound experience and they might see somebody in a different way. But to be able to really change our hearts and minds and to have the skills to navigate such profound differences takes time, which is why this program is long. And I think even now, our people have profound differences. They don't see things the same. We have people from all spectrums that are in the room together, but they can be in the room together and they can see each other as human and they are willing to continue to be together and to keep bringing their voices. And for sure, they have all been changed because they have all heard and shared stories that people on the other side had no idea about. And so hearts have gotten softened. Perspectives have most certainly been widened. And the intention is that the people graduating this program will be able to begin to do this work with others. I mean, that's our goal, is to create leaders who have the capacity to hold these differences in a way that brings something new. And we're still looking to find something new. We're still walking that direction in the unknown as the outside gets more horrific and painful and difficult. We're still walking together saying, let's hold on to our humanity. Let's see what we can do differently here.
Yeah, and that's what's so touching to me about the work, because just like the political activism that's like sides against each other, I feel like this work, out here in the West, I feel so privileged to get to do therapy work or get to do healing work or get to do self-care so that I can thrive and be more myself and be more alive. And right now, it's literal survival, where they are. And you're bringing, I think, the privilege that we have over there for them to have aliveness and deep feeling and love. It's so, I can't even to imagine like death actually being so close, like looking me in the eye.
Yeah.
And if I were to zoom out and think of it kind of on a spiritual level of like, well, what would my soul want to experience here on this earth? It's love. It's connection. That's to me why the work is so profound. It's a gift. I really feel. And
And I was thinking, Tammy, as you say that I learned so much from them. So, for instance, the last time I was there, I did a workshop in the West Bank with all West Bank Palestinians, and many people had never done this kind of thing before, and it was really profound. But one of the things that I see is how much singing and dancing is part of their healing.
oh yeah.
Like, just part of their healing. So we would have these really intense, painful, heart-wrenching experiences, and then the music would come on and everybody would get up and dance and sing, and you see, wow, human beings have a way of surviving, thriving, healing that they carry with them. And it's got nothing to do with Western psychology, or you have to process the trauma slowly, or whatever these stories are that we're taught. People have survived and thrived. I mean, and many times people who have been in these really difficult circumstances have so much power and strength and wisdom that it's just amazing to witness, you know?
Right. Yeah. Like what could be more radically alive than dancing in the tragedy, you know?
Right?
And yeah, and thank you so much for speaking to dance and song. And that's been so much of my own journey of, going in like the therapy route and then realizing like, wait, all of my Eastern traditions, like all of this wisdom that I didn't learn from anybody, come from like just lineages so far back. And, you know, um, and that's what I love about Radical Aliveness, and what you allow into the room is I've felt more and more space for me to bring what I know into the room, which, in all of these spiritual or these therapeutic models, I'm like, where is spirit? Why aren't we talking about the Tao? Why aren't we, like all of these practices seem very familiar to me, but nobody's really going back, to what might be cast out as simple and fun and play, but that's medicine in itself. And
Yes.
I could really feel your ability to be open to that in the room, which like even in Montreal, when we did have a process basically with the sides of, Palestine and like the Jewish side, like what broke out in Montreal, the quote unquote resolution, it's like we could talk and yell all day about who's doing what. And the beauty of it was that it just ended up in the room divided with a rage grief process on both sides, of both sides just being able to feel and groan and be held, and then and to sing, in mourning. And yeah.
Magic. It's yeah, and I think that you're speaking to something that also feels so important to me, which is, I think way early on, before I started Radical Aliveness, there was some emphasis on connection. We have to connect. We all have to be connected. No, I think we have to really be able to stand with our differences, and it's not that we'll all feel lovey-dovey or we'll all think the same. No. So I love your description of there's room for us to have this difference sitting right between us and to get on opposite sides of the room and howl. And what does that create in the space? And when that's allowed, what happens afterwards? And, so I think, just I never feel that sense that we have to be connected. It just doesn't feels like too much of an agenda to me.
Yeah, I love that you're making that distinction because sometimes that agenda can be harmful, you know, and that even
And
opens.
false, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not true.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah, so you're even like opening up space there. It's like, oh, I could just still dislike someone or like I could still disagree with someone. It was so reparative even in Montreal when we had one of the biggest explosive processes and the room was divided. It was racial. It was, very charged. And it didn't end up pretty. There was no bow, that sometimes I'm like
No.
looking for that pretty bow of like where we end up in a cuddle puddle. But we left like that. And it was so hard for a lot of us because we're like, are we going to come? Like, what's going to happen? And then for the next day, for us to be able to gather in a circle and hold hands and
Right?
still start the day off with the
Right?
dance and look into each other's
Right?
eyes. Yeah, that's some of the most reparative experiences I've had in my life that has helped me find safety in meeting complexity like this. And I could see the ways that it's changed me and the ways that I like cause less harm from having experienced this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm thinking back to Montreal, and I'm just thinking about what you were saying and what Samya, who was in our program uh, right after October 7th, saying, will we come back together? And there's something about the ability to be with this much conflict and difference in a way, allowing it space, allowing it expression, and having the intention to keep coming together as a group. As you
mm-hmm,
say, there's something that then settles into our bones and our cells, that we don't have to live in a simplistic world, that we don't have to pretend that things aren't difficult, that we don't have to agree, and that we can still come back together with all this information and say, where are we going now? Right? We
mm-hmm.
keep letting it unfold and keep letting it be as complex as it needs to be, and we stay. And I
Yeah.
was just speaking with Sylvia, who's my Palestinian partner, the other day, and we were talking about the program because I'm getting ready to go there in October. And she said, Anne, these people have stretched so much. The fact that they stayed together through all of this
Mm-hmm.
is a miracle. And I think it
Yeah.
is. I think it's a miracle.
Yeah. I mean, it is a miracle and it's so radical, actually, the work that you do. It's like radical aliveness is radical in itself. And then that also October 7th happened during the first time that you ran this program and that people are still staying together. What is your hope or like what does it look like after graduation? Like in the communities, do the leaders that you're training are they involved in like relief efforts and what is your hope for the graduates?
Well, my hope is that we start another program in September and that we take everything that we learned out of this program and that we set this next program up with all of the new information. My desire is that a lot of people involved in this program will be involved in the new program in ways either as holding groups or helping hold the program itself. And that also there will be people from this program who are joining together, maybe Palestinian and Jewish, depending, and leading groups in the community, that there will be people in the West Bank doing this work in the West Bank because it's really desperately needed there. It's just desperately needed. There's a lot less access to spaces where people can have their feelings, and they need to have their feelings. And so I see almost all of the people either involved in the program or doing groups on their own with us supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
There will probably be a couple people who say, okay, I'm done, and they'll take this to the work that they're doing. But I think most people will stay involved and be doing this work in the world in different ways.
When you say this work is so needed, people need to feel, it reminds me of when a Palestinian woman was seen in her full rage and like what happened in the room. If you could tell that story.
Well, I'll tell you a story from the recent retreat, which I think is different than the story you're asking about. But we did an all-Palestinian West Bank retreat, and 4 of our leaders from the program came to support. It was so wonderful. It was wonderful. And they brought all these people in. Many of them had never done this before. There was a woman there. So there were a couple men, and one man was saying some stuff, and I said, you seem like you have a lot of rage, a lot of anger. Would you like to try something? And he was like, okay. So I had him get up and try expressing his rage a little bit. And he did a little bit. But there was this other guy, and he said, I'll do it. And he got up, and it started coming through him, and it was strong, and he almost fell over because sometimes I find that people who've never done this work before, they'll start moving, and then they'll want to split, and they'll faint, or they'll want to faint or something. So I said, hey, this is a lot of rage. This is so much rage. You can't do this by yourself. Maybe there's some people that will help you. And there had been a woman in the room who was in a full hijab. She was a Muslim woman. And she had been very quiet, just sitting there. And I would ask, do you want to share something? No. Okay. So I said to the room, he can't hold this by himself. Can you get up and help him? Anybody? And she said, I will. I said, okay. So she stands up behind him, and he starts moving. She let out the most blood-curdling scream. And she kept screaming and screaming, and then he was screaming, and everybody was shocked, except for me. I was like, yes, this is great. And so they were kind of overwhelmed, and they sat down, and people gathered around them, and, they were trying, helping them. And I gave them a little bit of time, and then I went over and I said to her, can you tell me something? How many years has this voice been waiting to come out? And she said, 53. And then I said to him, and for you, 35.
Wow.
And I said, well, so everybody's in shock, and they're all a little bit scared. And I said, in the United States, we might call this a hallelujah moment. Hallelujah! And then everybody started laughing and yelling and dancing. So it's like it was just profound. And at the end of that retreat, people said to me, you've got to find a way to bring this back because we need a space. We need space for our feelings. So I have a big goal that some of the people from our program will be leading groups there. I am hoping to open a nonprofit in Israel, and hopefully at some point it will be successful enough to have Sylvie running it, because it really needs somebody on the ground there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, the work, I'm kind of known in Israel because it's a very small country, and so many people have seen that documentary, which is hilarious to me. But a lot of people know me, and now a lot of people know about me from this work. So
Right.
I feel like we just have this potential to really explode there and really set up a lot of on the ground
Right.
work being done. And from my perspective, that's our only hope in this world is, we've got to get enough people on the ground making different choices, because if we just focus on the powers that are running things, people just fall into despair.
Totally.
And I always say to them, stay underneath. Stay underneath those big power places and feel what's possible right here, because there's so much possible in the here and now in each of us right now.
Right. I think the story that I was remembering from another podcast maybe was when you were telling a story of a Palestinian woman having a process of rage and blood curdling scream, and there were also Israeli Jews in the room, and then I think the way you described it was when seen in her raw feeling, then suddenly everybody in the room, there are no sides anymore. Everybody's a mother, a brother, a sister.
I think that process, and I can say something about it, that she started by saying, I hate Jews. I hate Jews. And I said to all the Jewish people in the room, trust me. Let's let this move. I need you. It's going to feel shocking what comes out, but please just breathe, hold on to people, do what you need to stay present. And she started by just saying, I hate Jews, I hate Jews. I could kill all the Jews, something like that. It was the kind of things that people say that are so buried, right? Like you're saying, what happened for you. And then at a certain point, I stopped her and I said, I want to invite you to try something. She said, okay. And I said, I want you to take that same energy, but I want you to let it come up and go through your heart and let it speak for your people. And so she, instead of saying, I hate you, she just started screaming, can't you see we're mothers? Can't you see we want the same thing for our children? Can't you see us? Can you see us? Please, screaming, you must see us. We need to survive, whatever. I can't remember everything she said. And that it's like when there's room for the taboo, when there's room for the hate, when there's room for the shocking statements, when that can move without fear, there's the absolute possibility to take it the next step.
Right.
And the next step is a place of that energy is the rage for life. That energy is outrage. That energy is the desire to live. That energy is fierce love. That energy is something that has the capacity not to create separation, but to break everyone's heart. And that's what it did.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like staying in the bottom. Like right then, I can only imagine that that dissolves the separation in the room and that ripples out from like the bottom up and
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how do you really say to people, it's not enough to do it in this room?
Mm-hmm.
How do you carry this back out into the world? And
Mm-hmm.
what are the ways you bring this to your life, to your community?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so important that we're not doing this work in protected little rooms and then not using our skills to really help the world change.
Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of impossible not to bring it out. I can't even like keep it contained anymore.
Good. I love that. Yay. Yay.
Yeah. So there's two more modules left for this program before
Mhm.
graduating them. And I know you
Mhm.
mentioned that a lot of the participants have lost their livelihoods and there's like so much overhead cost too. And so I'm just curious like what is needed for these two modules to be able to complete to graduate.
Well, I got incredibly creative for this module because I was almost out of money and I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I realized that I could invite people from the United States and Canada and Mexico to come on a trip. So people are coming on a trip when it's part of our program. What's really fun and interesting is that I'm asking the participants to choose different parts of the retreat. I mean, there's going to be tours, but then we'll be together for 3 days. And I want them to use their skills. I want them
Mm-hmm.
to help co-lead this, but also participate. So we're going to have money to cover this module
Mm-hmm.
because I invited all these people. The money for next module, we need probably around $40,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a little vision while I was talking here.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, I had this vision because I'm trying to encourage myself to be open to receiving
Yeah.
more. And because the work that we do is very wild. I mean, it's I think deeply responsible. It's deeply integrous. It's deeply meaningful. It changes people's lives and it's out of the box. So it's not easy to get an organization or, a typical grant organization to fund us because they're scared of us.
Yeah.
We don't fit their mold. So my vision is that somebody's going to be really inspired listening to this and want to give us a lot of money or know somebody who has a lot of money to give us. Because
Amazing.
yes, I shall I show you my bone?
Yes.
This I found in the desert in Israel,
Oh, wow.
down by the Dead Sea. And I asked it if it wanted to come home with me, and it said yes. So I brought it here to sit with me while I was doing this podcast. And this bone really like spoke to me and said, I have been here for a long time and I'm
Mm.
going to be around for a long time. And you human beings, I don't know what it is. It might be like a big sheep or something, but it really spoke to me about kind of seeing the big, long picture. And I just have this vision that someone's going to be inspired to give us a lot of money so we can open a nonprofit in Israel and so that we can really support this work in spreading because I feel like if we could keep our group together, with their profoundly different perspectives through October 7th, through a war, and they are excited to come back for the next module, and they are excited to graduate, and they're excited that we're bringing people in to meet with them, then there's something that we're doing that needs to be supported and spread, because the powers that be don't know anything different than killing. And we do. We know how to be in a room and let people bring their feelings of murderous rage and have them turn into heartbreak. And let's spread this work. Let's get it going in the world so that we can maybe make a difference. Maybe we can influence enough people to do something different. Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes courage and it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. And your wild revolutionary, just like ability to dream so big has inspired me so much beyond what I ever thought was possible for my life. And, and you bring that into the world in something that's seemingly impossible. And I also always appreciate in the room when you're saying, I'm on the 10,000 year plan. And there's but there's ancestral wisdom to that of like, how is it going to be just me, just us in this lifetime? Like, can we zoom out to see the bigger picture and where we come from and what's to come,
Yeah. And I think all the people in this program are also doing it for their children, right? Mm-hmm. They're really saying, I'm going to keep showing up because I really want a different world for my children. And as hard as this is, I'm going to keep showing up and do the work.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious if you could leave the world with one nugget of wisdom, what would that be?
I think I always say the same thing. This is always what comes up. Don't let fear stop you. Right? Fear seems like it's saying, turn around and walk the other direction. And in my life, every time I felt fear, I walked towards it, and my life kept getting bigger and bigger and more expansive. So I just feel we're here to learn. Fear is a sign that maybe there's something I have to learn, and to be open to doing what we came here to do, regardless of how scary it is or what roadblocks are being put up. Like, I think we all have some wisdom in us that's saying, there's something I need to do, even if it's tiny in a moment. And I believe human beings are very powerful and can do what they came here to do. So let's do it together.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine can't imagine the amount of setbacks, not to mention October 7th alone, and possibly criticism for being a woman in a white body doing this work. What drives you through that? Yeah. I know, like, you laugh, I've witnessed people, say that you're just doing this to promote your work. And I've, witnessed all kinds of criticisms come at you. And what keeps you what keeps you grounded in that place of just like continuing on anyway?
Well, I think there's nothing to be afraid of from the outside if you know what's true for you inside. So if people don't see me or they don't like me or they question me, welcome. It's okay. Mm-hmm. I know what's true for me, and that's my guiding light. And so I just keep following that, and I don't expect to be liked and loved or understood. It's not that important to me. And I don't necessarily expect to be remembered. I don't expect any of that. So I'm letting go and just having my life.
Right. Beautiful. It's such a humble path. It's like, for me, it's like a very humble path of serving, of being a humble servant.
Service to something larger than yourself. That's a bit of nugget.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Anne. And this was so special. And
I had such a good time, Tammy. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will see you in about 2 weeks.
Okay. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Underneath the show notes, I've included the link to donate to this program, as well as other links to learn more about Radical Aliveness and the work that Anne is doing in Israel and Palestine. I'll see you next time on The Art of Relating.
One day, taste the roots. He was born from passing the story, how all hands came together as one.